Everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm hoping we can do kind of a fun talk about AI today. I'm faculty at Full Circle Health, but work at St. Al's on our inpatient service. So just a couple additional disclosures. I am not an expert in AI. I've actually done no formal training in this. So a lot of what you're going to see today, any of you who have done formal trainings or like programmers or anything like that, you know more than me. So please feel free to chime in. I think this is an area that we're all learning from each other a lot. My claim to expertise is I am a millennial, which I guess just gives me some sort of generational technology cred. And then my partner is big in tech, and so he's been really helpful as I've navigated this very rapidly changing landscape. I have no financial disclosures, but I do have kind of a big disclosure in that I'm going to be naming a lot of very specific applications and programs and software companies. I'm not doing that to endorse any of them. I really am just doing that because I want today to be a very practical tool. I want you to be able to like look up this specific application and then just get going and start using it right away. But what I would say is I'm not going to list every single AI technology that exists. So there are going to be some that I am forgetting. So this is not a totally inclusive list. And I'm not endorsing the ones that I do list. I'm just going to try to tell you the ones that I've used before. But if there's a technology that you're interested in, try to do some research about which other ones exist and get comfortable using the tools and see which one you favor for whatever reasons you may choose. Okay, what we'll talk about today is first kind of some terminology and definitions as they pertain to AI, this big term. Then we'll go through the meat of this that I want to be the practical application, so very specific tools. Basically, I'm hoping that there's some you haven't yet heard of that are going to make your life better. And then I really want to go through some of the cautions and considerations that we need to know when using AI so that we can all be informed and safely using these for ourselves, for our patients, and things like that. So what is AI? First, AI isn't one thing. It's a huge category. So think of it kind of like transportation. And the more specific we get with our terminology, the better it can be. For example, if somebody asks, how'd you get to work today? You're not going to say, oh, well, I used transportation. You're going to say, I drove my car, I bike commuted, I used public transportation, something like that. Just like when we're using AI, we shouldn't just say, oh yeah, I used AI to build this presentation. The more specific our language can be, the better. So AI as a category is the field of computer science that aims to create systems capable of performing tasks that prior to AI typically required human intelligence. There's a couple big broad categories. There's traditional AI and generative AI. So traditional AI is kind of this narrow or weak AI. Think of this as machine learning, but that is programmed very specifically for a specific task. It's task-oriented, and it's kind of used to analyze data and make predictions in a specific category. So for example, your streaming service suggestion algorithm, you've watched these movies, we think you would like this, and gives you a suggestion. Or the medical example of this would be applying AI to radiology. Kind of the traditional AI would be, can a program identify pneumonia or not pneumonia on a chest x-ray? So when given, uploaded an image of a chest x-ray, can a technology look at that and say, pneumonia, not pneumonia? Whereas generative AI, also called Gen AI, is a bit more of a black box. So this isn't programmed really specifically. It is trained on a massive set of data and asked to recognize specific patterns and to generate new content or new data. It's a bit of a black box. So this might be in your kind of real life example, this would be like the LLMs that people use a lot when they're talking about AI. Like when they say, well, I asked AI and it said this. They're probably talking about Claude or ChatGPT. The medical example of this, again in radiology, would be an MRI reconstruction or post-image processing. So take an MRI that somebody had motion artifact. There are AI tools that can reprocess that MRI and create a new image that doesn't yet exist by predicting, based on that motion artifact, I think it's more likely that the real structure looks like this. There's also a lot of different domains of AI, and each different AI talk that you go to is going to describe these slightly differently and include different categories. I'd say the two that you need to know for sure are machine learning and natural language processing. We're going to talk about those in more detail on subsequent slides, but it's also good to be familiar with some of these other domains. So computer vision, that's the specific type of AI that is discussing a computer program's ability to interpret images or videos. So this would be like a retina view scanner or something like that applied in clinic, where it looks at the back of a retina and it says diabetic retinopathy or not, normal, or needs to see an ophthalmologist. Whereas robots and haptics, kind of what it sounds like, it's actual tactile artificial intelligence being applied to robotics, such as the Da Vinci 5 uses some AI for some tactile feedback, or like self-driving cars are using this. Planning and optimization is using AI in order to best optimize kind of creating a schedule. And then expert systems is a domain of AI that is a very specifically applied technology. Often it's using kind of an algorithmic approach to a very specific application of AI. Machine learning and natural language processing, like if you kind of overlap those technologies, you get LLMs, large language models. This would be the better language to use when talking about the tool called like ChatGPT or Claude. Those are large language models, and we'll talk about those again in greater detail. And then small language models, similarly, are the overlap of machine learning and natural language processing. So what's machine learning? Machine learning is it's the technology that enables computers to learn from or identify patterns rather than being explicitly programmed. So hard programming is kind of the old school way that we asked computers to do tasks for us. So I type in this and I'm asking for this specific thing, and the machine spits out this specific answer, and it's able to do very specific hard programmed tasks. Whereas machine learning is kind of asking a machine to just recognize patterns and grow on its own, not very specifically programmed, not hard programmed every single rule. There's two major ways that this happens. There's supervised learning and unsupervised learning. In supervised learning, a programmer is giving labeled data to their program. So the retinal scanner I mentioned earlier, this is trained by thousands and thousands of images of a retina that are labeled. They say, this one is a normal retina, this one has diabetic retinopathy, this one is a drusen deposit. And a program just looks at thousands and thousands and kind of develops a pattern recognition, so that then when it's given unlabeled data, it produces an answer that it thinks is likely. Whereas unsupervised learning is essentially a programmer is uploading a massive amount of some sort of data and asking the program to identify patterns in it. So the example of this would be molecular structures and corresponding biological activities could be uploaded into a program. And then that tool is asked to identify specific patterns so that it could figure out, this specific molecular structure only exists in this area of the body to do this one biological activity. And that's being applied to pharmacotherapies to reduce risk of side effects. Natural language processing, so the other kind of piece of this that's creating LLMs or our large language models, is natural language processing. This concept is easier to understand. So this is enabling machines to understand. I use that word kind of carefully because they don't really understand, but using them to interpret and generate human language. So this is the backbone of the technologies like your virtual assistants like Hey Siri or Alexa, those types of things, and the chatbot LLMs like ChatGPT. It's also used in our translation services. So LLMs, right? This is the thing. This is Gen AI in most of what we're talking about in popular culture. The fusion of that machine learning that we talked about and natural language processing. These are trained on massive amounts of data and then kind of learn by the massive amounts of data that they've seen. They can identify patterns and then they use their best judgment, or I guess it's not judgment, they use their best algorithm to predict what should be the most accurately syntactical thing when you ask it a question. So for example, you could upload the entire internet or massive libraries of books and music and up to a program. And then it's not taught what words mean, but it might see this THEY a lot or THE a lot, and it starts to associate that with patterns that might fall after it. If that's an unclear definition, which I think it kind of is, you could better understand an LLM by asking an LLM. So I plugged into one of these LLMs. I think this was Claude. Explain what large language models are, how they get their input data, and how they generate output. So essentially, I asked an LLM, who are you? What are you? How do you work? And it told me LLMs are powerful AI systems trained on vast amounts of text data to understand and generate human language. They get their data from vast amounts of text like internet, books, articles, and other publicly available sources. And they generate output by predicting and selecting tokens, those kind of clusters of characters, one after another, based on patterns they've learned during training without any true understanding of the world. They taught me what they are. What else can an LLM do for you? They can write your letters of recommendation. They can interpret, they can translate from Spanish to English. They can create a workout plan for your patients. They can create a diet plan. They can reword something that you've written to be nicer or in a second grade reading level. They can do a lot of things quite well. One thing I just want to call out is that I wrote in here, write an excellent letter of recommendation for Mickey Mouse, who's currently doing extremely well in a family medicine residency. I literally, when I am asking these to write a letter of recommendation, I say Mickey Mouse or something similar. I don't put in any of my information or any of anyone else's information, and I'll talk a little bit more about that why later. But literally, this is a prompt that I have plugged in, and then I would say these are his qualifications, and I type in a little bit of some of the things that I know about this applicant for fellowship. There are so many chatbot LLMs. I think probably the two most popular that you've heard a lot about are probably Claude and ChatGPT, but these are all also chatbot LLMs. There are seriously so many. There's pros and cons to each of them. The majority of them have a free version, and so what I would tell you to do is download them or go to their web browser version and just start trying them. Do your own research about them. How are they getting their data? Are they fair? Do they do a good job of kind of filtering what data they're using? And just start using them. Whatever they spit out to you, though, that is your jumping off point. That is your, very basic structure. You then are responsible for going through everything that is in there and making sure that it's legitimate. Okay, so remember that I said LLMs are trained on massive amounts of information, like the whole internet. That could include a conspiracy theorist blog post. It might not all be very reliable data. So when we're asking for scientific or medical answers, we need to make sure we're not using a system that is using a conspiracy theorist blog post or Reddit or whatever. So Open Evidence tried to solve this problem. What they do is a technique called retrieval augmentation. It's an LLM that's paired with 35 million medical peer-reviewed journal articles. And when asked a question, the system searches that specific pool. It says, I don't even know about any of these, blog posts or anything that's not a peer-reviewed journal article. It does not have access to that information. So when you ask it a question, it only has the medical peer-reviewed journal articles to pull from. So it's free for clinicians, at least for now, which always makes me wonder, why is it free? And then I'll show you what open evidence looks like in a second, but I did want to give a quick plug in case there's other kind of people interested in less medical but still scientific literature. So Semantic Scholar and Logically app did the same thing, but not specific to medical peer-reviewed journals, so just other kind of scientific literature. So here's an example of open evidence. It works very quickly. So one of the ways that you can do it is like, I'm having a brain fart. My patient is walking to the lab and I know I'm forgetting something that I need to check on their CKD labs. Quickly, hey, open evidence, list the lab workup for chronic kidney disease, stage 3B, and it will spit out an answer. And you're like, oh yeah, I was forgetting, the PTH or whatever. Then you keep scrolling down and it explains in greater detail. And then at the very bottom, it cites its sources. So it says, hey, I got this from, these specific guidelines. And then what's cool is if you have access to those specific guidelines or that specific publisher, you can then click to the article and actually read the primary literature and make sure that what you just saw in summary on open evidence is actually what your article is saying. Open Evidence has a great app that's really easy to use, and their web interface is excellent. Again, free for clinicians. I think you should give it a try if you're not yet using this. Another medically relevant LLM is Doximity GPT. Many of you may already be familiar with Doximity. Their kind of shtick is that this is a HIPAA compliant chatbot LLM. So they're claiming that I still do not input any patient data. I'm a skeptic, but they're claiming that this is HIPAA compliant. And it's giving you a couple examples listed there of things that you might ask Doximity GPT to do for you. Another way that you can interface with this AI technology is interfacing with a PDF. So if you want to spice up your journal club, consider using one of these. So the one that's kind of on the background there is Chat PDF, but ask your PDF and Adobe Acrobat AI Assistant. All three of those are PDF chatbots. So they are an LLM specifically designed with how do you interface with a PDF? So basically you upload your article, you just drag and drop. Again, this is free for your first like 10 articles or something like that. And it'll say, hey, I see you've got this article. What do you want to do with it? You can ask it to summarize. You can go through it. And what I asked of it was, how did the studies measure functional outcomes? This was related to osteoarthritis, which often is really variable in how people are measuring their functional outcomes. So they said this was a lit review. So they said, these were the ways in which they measured functional outcomes. And I went through the article, double checked this one, and they did get it correct. So kind of a cool way to quickly interface with a PDF, especially some of the really, really long ones. It can really be a time saver for you. If that's not good enough, interacting with one article, and you would like AI to just do an entire literature review for you, you're in luck. It can do that. So Elicit is a technology that was created specifically to do literature reviews of the papers that it has uploaded to it. So it may not include every single paper that you would like to have included in the lit review, but it has 125 million papers. So, the gold standard is a literature review for when we're trying to make recommendations to our patients, and they don't always exist yet, and you don't always have time to do an entire lit review. So you might consider using Elicit, or at least to get you started on a lit review. Cite is another example of a LLM designed specifically to do literature reviews and kind of navigate with instead of just one paper, kind of navigating your way through multiple scientific papers. So here's an example of elicit. I used this for later in the talk. What is the impact of AI-powered symptom checkers on healthcare costs and diagnostic accuracy in primary care settings compared to a traditional clinical assessment? If you type in a question that it doesn't think is a good question, it'll give you ideas for how you could write a more specific lit review question. It might say, you don't have a patient population identified, or your outcome's not very specific. And then once you're happy with your question, you say go, and then it says, okay, I need about 10 minutes to go through all the literature and I'll email you when I'm done. So you go about your day and you eat your cheese and crackers, and then you get an email that says, okay, I'm done with your literature review. And you pull open elicit, and what it says to you is, your clinical question. It gives you a summary statement. AI symptom checkers show variable diagnostic accuracy, 34 to 90%. And then you can read through the abstract, and then it breaks down in beautiful tables. These were all the papers that I looked at. Here's why. This was their study population. This was how they measure their outcome. And this was what their findings were, just like a literature review would look like. Again, free for the initial version of this. AI scribes. If you are not using an AI scribe yet, you should at least try one. I think that these can be absolutely life-changing for us. So they use ambient listening and natural language processing to create a transcript. They then kind of process that with a small language model, and they write your note for you. They'll also, if you ask them to, write a patient summary in, second grade reading level, or a colleague communication if you're a specialist, whatever else you might need. They can also translate notes. That one's a little trickier because hard to double check if you don't speak the language you're asking it to interface with. Some use a copy-paste technique. So you open it up in a web browser and you're kind of copy-pasting into your EHR. Some of them, though, interface directly with your EHR. There are dozens and dozens of AI scribes right now. I haven't listed them all out because what I would say the more practical way to start doing this is figure out which ones have been approved by your organization and use those, and see what you think of them. And here's why you should be using them. So this is not yet published, but this is pending publishing, a study out of University of Michigan, Health West. They found significant improvement in clinical efficiency. So almost 30% reduction in time spent per note. So they found an average of 50 minutes saved per providers per day. This was in an outpatient setting. They improved accuracy. So their study found that notes were more detailed when using an AI scribe. It was both providers and patients reported feeling like each party was more present in the conversation, and patients perceived that the visits were longer than they were, and that their provider was more engaged with them. They improved revenue, so there was an average increase of 53 RVUs per provider per month. I don't use RVUs, so I don't actually know if that's a lot or not. Maybe one of you can tell me, but it's an increase, and that wasn't something that they were expecting, because they were not asking any of their providers to cram in more visits or to do anything to increase revenue. It just happened. And then my additional input that wasn't in the study is I think the patient summaries are fantastic. They help my patients remember what we talked about that day. Remember, you're going to check your blood pressure 3 times over the next month, 3 times per week over the next month, and you're going to bring your log in to the next visit. And then they do that at the next visit. That never happened before. And for me, it just gives me a better outlook on my administrative tasks. It's like I have somebody there, when I have to do my notes, I'm not alone. I have somebody there with me. And it just really helps make it a more pleasant experience for me. Another way that AI, if you're somebody who creates a lot of presentations, AI can also be leveraged there. So Gamma, I'll show you a couple pictures of Gamma.app for generating presentations. SlidesGo AI is another kind of presentation generator, like PowerPoint style. Beautiful.ai can help beautify your presentations. Microsoft Copilot is integrated within PowerPoint. Gemini similarly integrated within Google Slides. And then Pitch, I guess, is one that's preferred by some sales teams. And then Storied is a little bit more of kind of a presentation framework generator. So that first one on there, gamma.app, here's an example, a couple screenshots from it. So you can type in a prompt, just literally a couple of sentences on what you would like it to create as a presentation, or you can create a whole outline for what you'd like it to do. But if you just type in a couple sentences, it gives you an outline and it says, are these kind of the slides that you were hoping for? And if so, you just hit next, and then it creates very AI looking, but very beautiful presentations. I do find, just a heads up, they don't interface very well with like PowerPoint. So if you're trying to export them, things don't keep formatted the exact same. So just, I mean, use with caution, but play around with these. If you're somebody who creates a lot of PowerPoints, or a lot of presentations rather, this could save you some time. Patients are probably going to start using these more than we know. They often are already using Claude or ChatGPT to answer their life questions, but they may also be interfacing with them specific to mental health. This is a list of interactive LLMs specifically designed for mental health. And so, you say, hey, chatbot, whoever you are, I'm having a really bad day, or I'm in a fight with my partner, whatever. And it is programmed to have a very empathetic voice and walk people through the problem that they're struggling with. And we're studying these, trying to gather more information. I would say what the bottom line at the moment is like, chatbots are here. Some patients are gonna prefer these and want to utilize them. In general, they're never gonna be as good as a true trained professional counselor, psychotherapist, psychiatrist, psychologist. However, they may have a place when it's 2 a.m. and you can't get an appointment, or you live really rural and telehealth can only get you so much. Things like that, they may play an important role. Symptom assessment. So these are essentially triage chatbots. My one-liner here would be, as individual providers, there's not enough evidence for us to be like, yeah, use this, patients. But some kind of higher level systems, like big systems, may find it useful to incorporate these in part of their triage. Okay, so those are the tools. There are like, I cut out my whole AI tech section. There's so many gadgets related to AI, but I did not have time to cover it all. There's so much stuff. I wanted to spend some time talking about the ethical considerations, because this stuff is really, really important to understand how we can responsibly be using AI. So the first comment is about power and energy usage. So these programs that we are talking about are massive amounts of data that are hosted within supercomputers on massive server farms. They use so much power, and they get really, 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 really hot, and we then have to use power to cool them down. Training the LLMs uses a ton of power. And so I want you to think about like using the right tool for the task. So a regular internet search often gets you the answer that you need. And using an LLM type search, such as a query on ChatGPT, uses 10 times the power that an internet search may use. Though, fair warning, many of our internet browsers are also now incorporating an AI feature. So I think just be cognizant of the power consumption and how big of an impact that can have. Hallucinations. So LLMs predict the most syntactically correct answer, not necessarily the most accurate answer or the most correct answer. And what's concerning is they very confidently tell you, this is the answer. And they can falsely annotate or falsely cite sources. So they're like, this is the answer, and here's all the reasons why I'm telling you this is the right answer. But it's not always the right answer. So one way that you can kind of double check this is you can ask the LLM to explain how it got its answer. Or most importantly, especially if you're applying this in a clinical setting, you have to double check. You have to cross-reference, or you have to pull up the source that it is actually citing. Bias. So remember, these LLMs are just given massive amounts of data, whether it's a blog post or medical literature or what. Garbage in equals garbage out. Keep in mind, a lot of our medical literature has many biases already baked in, and so the output that you're going to be getting is also going to have those biases, but it's not going to be clear because, again, it will just present to you, this is the answer. So mitigate this by approaching LLMs with humility, recognizing they may not have the best data input. If you can, determine how the developers, created their tool and how they audit their model. And then I think I'll be grateful when these are more widely applied, but developers are trying to work on this. So one specific example, studies have shown that AI models likely underestimate illness in Black patients. So they'll tell a Black patient that they're fine and don't need to seek medical care, when in fact they could be very ill. And you can see how that could cause huge impacts in somebody's health. So a research group at University of Michigan developed a way to correct for this bias, or at least is really working on how to make this better and how we can train our AI models and interpret the data that they give us back. Consent, super important. So are patients okay with the use of ambient listening, right? If you're going to be using an AI scribe, you have to get the patient's permission before you're doing that. Was the data gathered violating copyright issues? So remember, massive amounts of data are put into these models. And so you could imagine a way that you could pay for a paper once or pay for a subscription to a certain medical society once, upload it to your tool as a programmer, and then now you're selling that tool even though you've only uploaded it once. So it's really important that developers are honest about how they got their data, that they're honest about, are they paying the people who actually publish the research? Are they paying the journals? Things like that. And I think our legal system is going to be really busy kind of working their way through all of this. Who owns what? I posted something to a random blog post at whatever time, or I made this music and I put it on my Facebook page. AI can now have that, anything that is public. And so we got to be really careful about who owns what. And then who's profiting. So the majority of these products have a free version, or at least free to users. Why is that? How is the data that they are inputting or that they are receiving and the information that they are gathering going to be utilized? Security. So I think it's really important to keep in mind that programmers can use anything on the internet. I was just mentioning this under kind of the copyright issues, but it's important to be thinking about this as far as how it pertains to patient information. If using patient data, you have to make sure it's a HIPAA compliant resource, such as your AI scribes. But then also limit your personal information or the information of others while using these technologies. And then this one's kind of interesting. Programmers and or machine learning technologies can generate large amounts of bogus data that can influence or corrupt LLMs. So we really need to be careful about how we're trusting data, how data is being developed, and how we then apply it forward. In medical decision making, I hope you're all know to be really thoughtful about this. So in healthcare, there are no current federal or state regulations to guide us. The FDA has started regulating AI that's integrated into the EHRs, such as the AI scribes that interface with EHRs. But the majority of these tools have no regulation other than you and me. We are the regulators right now. So we have to be vigilant. We have to double check everything that we are using. Never use these tools alone always verify that the AI outputs make sense based on what your, clinical reasoning is, and that you're using other tools with them, right? These are a supplement. These are not your authoritative sources. It is not going to hold up in court if you say, well, open evidence told me that this was the thing to do, and I didn't double check anything, and I didn't actually look to where the resource stood. You have to use them as kind of supplements. And then we have to be transparent about this. So it's really hard to know, did something get generated by AI? Was an AI tool used when I made this presentation? Yes. I tried to cite when images were generated with AI, kind of over them, things like that. But there's no standards for how and when to cite. We just need to do our best to be honest about what we're making. And we need to always get consent when we're going to be utilizing these technologies. Hopefully, people are being really thoughtful about this. So this is one paper that kind of proposes an international consensus guideline for how to use AI in healthcare. And so I think we'll start seeing this, become a process that does have some regulation. Okay, so after all the this is really scary. You have to be really, really responsible. I do want you to be responsible, but I also really, really want you to try all of these things. Go get out there, use them responsibly, but you have to get to know them. Don't be afraid of them. Get out there, give them a go, get the free versions of all of them, and use a bunch of them and see which ones you like and see which ones you don't like. AI won't replace physicians. It won't replace providers. Don't believe anything that says our jobs are going to be taken away from us. They won't. But physicians who use AI will replace physicians who don't. These are important technologies that are going to make us more efficient. They're going to make us more evidence-based if we can be smart about them. So we've got to utilize these technologies. Okay, I will pause there and see if anyone has questions. And please feel free to reach out to me via email also if there's specifics you wanted to ask offline about any of the kind of specific tools that I just talked about. Okay, thanks everybody.